Hi there, my name's Jim, this is my shed and you're welcome to it. This is going to be the first in a series of videos documenting the mods I'm doing to my Peugeot 205. To be perfectly honest, I'm not sure how regular these videos will be. I'd love to say I'll do them once a week, but I know full well that life's going to get in the way. Just not going to have time to get enough content together to make weekly videos, so we'll just see what happens. And when there's some interesting stuff to look at, then I'll put something together and put it out. The car itself I've had for about 10 years, been tinkering with it on and off, like a lot of long-term projects. I'm sure it actually is a standing joke among family and friends, but it has been on the road. Did get it MOT'd and dynoed and things, drove it briefly, but school run needs doing. 2 seats in the car, not the most practical thing, so got laid up for a few years, and yeah, that was that. So ran around in the family car for a bit till my mum wanted her garage back, and I decided I'd like to get some more work done on the Peugeot, so we're starting again. Let's have a look at the car. And here she is in all her glory, a Peugeot 205 style. Possibly the most ironic title ever given to a car, but 760 kilos curb weight as standard, pretty light. The idea was a bit more power, lower it a bit, maybe do the brakes and just make a decent fast road car, and something I can just mess around in. But as with all things, got a bit carried away, ended up drilling holes everywhere, deleting brackets where they weren't needed or remaking them in aluminium. The interior all stripped out, as you can see, no back seats, just the 2 shell bucket seats in the front, single park wiper. Major weight saving came from the rear suspension, which I can't show you now as I can't really jack the car up in the place it's in because my facilities are less than ideal, but you've got to just make do with what you've got. Having said that I couldn't show you the rear suspension, I thought I'd throw in a still picture of it here so you get an idea of what I was talking about. You can see the 2 lower links, the beam axle and the A-arm on top for lateral location. The coilovers bolting into subframes that bolt to the original subframe mounting point, so I didn't have to modify the shell at all to fit it. The main reason I made this was because the original plan was to use the standard rear suspension, just rebuild it with uprated torsion bars and a 1-inch anti-roll bar. I then removed it to do all this work and discovered how heavy it was, and I thought, I'm not drilling holes in the bodywork and then bolting this great lump back on, so there we are. The rest is history. The rear brakes utilised the original hubs turned down to take original 205 solid front discs, which in turn have been modified to fit inside ZX10 motorbike brake calipers. For the front suspension, I welded brackets onto the subframes so it would take GTI front wishbones, meant I could do away with the front anti-roll bars and give it a bit of anti-dive geometry at the same time. I used coilovers, non-damping adjustable, with 206 GTI vented discs and high-spec 4-pot calipers. So this is the bit that for me is the most interesting, the engine. There's definitely a type of car enthusiast who aren't really car enthusiasts, they're just engine enthusiasts, and the car's a necessary evil that comes along with it. Well, I definitely fall into that category. So what have we got? It's a TU3 1.4 wet liner bottom end that originally was just going to have a ported head, maybe some throttle bodies on it and a cam, but then obviously got carried away and bought a 16 valve head off a Saxo to go on it. Went on without too much trouble. I think I needed to modify an oil return. I can't remember if I welded the head or the block, but other than that it just bolted straight on. The cam belt is a US spec V-dub diesel belt. The engine obviously came, the 16 valve engine came with a 1600 crank, so I figured why not use that, up the capacity a little bit. Just needed 50 thou top of the pistons and some valve pockets cut out, and then that gave 1450 cc's with about 11:1 compression ratio with the standard VTS heads. That didn't need anything skimming off it. The crank itself was a fully counterweighted crank, so I decided to machine off as much of the counterweights as I could and knife edge it, and that took an entire month of lunch times at work, with the crank coming on and off the mill every lunchtime. So the accuracy was absolutely shot to hell, and when it went to be balanced, they had quite a bit of fun getting it balanced, but it's all fine now. The throttle bodies are off a BMW 1000 RR. They're a little bit big for the 1450, sort of on a car engine at least, but you know, I thought it couldn't hurt, and I didn't in the end. Custom manifold, so I made that, ported to the head. The airbox I made with bell mouths inside that were actually my first try at aluminium spinning, and seemed to come out okay. The exhaust, fabricated a 421 manifold. The trouble with these engines traditionally is that there isn't room to get two pipes underneath, so I modified the sump to give a bit more clearance, and also cut away the subframe and strengthened it up so that the exhaust went straight through, whereas before it had to go up and over. The engine has been moved back as far as possible, so you can see how close the airbox is to the bulkhead. Made all new engine and gearbox mounts using these polyurethane cotton reel type mounts, so not going to move too much. And with it moved back so far, I had to notch out the subframe to clear the diff, but again, because of those cotton reel mounts, it doesn't move very much. The end result, it made 151 horsepower on Bailey rollers, which given the spec I was more than happy with. So what are my plans going forward? Already having said that I'm an engine man, first things first, a lot more power. I'm going to build a turbo lump. My original plan was to go with a 1600 16 valve, which I've already bought. Haven't stripped it down yet, still sat out in the garden making the place look like a scrapyard. Luckily my lovely wife is very understanding in that regard. I was going to fit a 1.4 crank to get the compression ratio down to about 8:1 with standard rods and pistons, so I could then put a couple of bar boosts through it. Obviously get ideas, watch videos. I was inspired by the Chris Harris review on that 911 that his friend built, 11,000 RPM thing, so I thought, why don't I build an engine for lots of RPM? So to that end I bought myself an 1100 crank, get the capacity down to 1300. Luckily you can buy rods for these engines in all sorts of lengths, so I could get a set of steel rods, get the compression back, forged pistons, different head with valve springs and solid lifters and solid lifter cams to go with that, and ultimately decided it was just too much money. Sounded like a fun project, so back to the original. It'll just be a fairly standard bottom end with a 1.4 crank, as I said. Be about 1500 cc, but 3,500 horsepower should be more than enough in a car that's hopefully going to weigh about 750 kilos all up. I mean, I'm not the lightest, but even with me in it, that means it'll be running at about 850 kilos, so it should be quite exciting to drive. The gearbox I'm going with is going to be a B3, so you can see beside me there's some gearbox bits. I've already started on that. The first gearbox I stripped was actually in error. I bought it thinking it would bolt onto the engine that I've got, but didn't come from the car that the scrapyard said it did. So I didn't realise until I thought, oh, I better check if the case actually fits the engine. It didn't, but inside it, it had a 4.7:1 final drive, which might be a bit low, but as I'm building, you know, something for a bit of fun, if it's too low in the future, then I'll have to build another box, but I just think that'll do the job quite nicely. It's also got perfect synchros in it, which is quite lucky, because when I strip down the gearbox for the ratios that I want, which come out of a 206 GTI 180, this car's obviously been driven by a bit of a boy racer. You can see some wear on the gears, not perfect condition, and the reverse gear's obviously been rammed into the mesh while it's still moving, so there's some damage there. So I'm going to keep the shaft out of the original box. So all the synchros out of that box because they're perfect. Got new bearings to go in it. Build them all onto this shaft with the limited slip diff, and that should give me all the gearbox I'll need. Clutch wise, I do have to see what finances allow, but I would like to make a small diameter clutch, so use a 7 1/4 with probably a twin plate paddle in there, and then a very light ring gear, so to get the rotating mass down as possible, because I'm a big fan of lightweight. But we'll have to see how we go. It probably will just end up with a standard type clutch, you know, funds allowing and all that. I've been buying up bits over the last couple of years, so just something a month as things turn up for the right price. I've been getting them, so I've got a lot of the parts I'll need. But obviously with this thing, this kind of thing, there's so many imponderables that you just don't know what's going on until you get started. So I think the gearbox will probably be the first build video I get out, only because I've got those here. I've got 2 gearbox cases there, I've got another gearbox outside. I've got to start clearing bits out, so getting the gearbox put together will be one bit done, and it'll clear me a lot of space. So yeah. So there are my plans for the car mechanically. Once all that's done, obviously it's going to be all the ancillary work, so intercooler, need new end tanks, get rid of those horrible square ones that are on there at the moment, all the pipe work, new inlet manifold with 660C injectors and a 770mm throttle body that I've already got on the shelf. Injector size, people seem to be going a bit mad with injector size lately. All sorts of 1000cc injectors all over the place. Seeing as some years ago I built an MX-5 turbo that made over 300 horsepower on 440cc injectors, I don't see the need for going crazy on those. So I think the 660s will be more than adequate for what I'm doing. Obviously turbo will need a new exhaust manifold with external wastegate. Exhaust system is coming out the front of the car, so I'm not going to have a system going through the back, so that'll be a 3-inch, some sort of silencer on it to keep the noise down. I'm not having it coming out the bonnet or anything daft like that. Probably have a separate dump pipe coming out the other side of the car, but we'll see how that works out. Cooling system, I've got a small Honda radiator. Not going to be doing any towing, so not going to need huge amounts of low speed cooling, so that rad should be more than adequate, and it'll give me plenty of space for a nice turbo placement. You know, plenty of space at the front of the car, so I'm not restricted on where I want to sit that and where I want to route the various bits of pipe work and stuff. I've got a 255 litre per hour fuel pump to go on there, and I'll probably upgrade the fuel lines because I've only got 8mm solid lines running front to back, which probably be okay, but no harm just upping those slightly, probably go to 10s. Plans I've got for the interior of the car mean that I'm probably going to have to, well, not probably, I'm definitely going to have to change the gear linkage, but I think I'll dispense with the standard bell cranks that Peugeot use and try and go directly onto the input shaft, or the gear change input shaft. That does create a bit of difficulty with the linkage. I might have to go with cables, or I'd like to do a mechanical linkage, but we'll just see how feasible that is, because the gear sort of has to work backwards, so I'd have bell cranks everywhere trying to reverse the movement of the gear lever itself. That's what I want to do mechanically with the car. Now, as for the interior, inspired by a certain Mr. Gordon Murray and his McLaren F1, my favourite performance car of all time. In my opinion, the best clean sheet design ever. Just, love it. And then later bringing out the T50, which, with the best will in the world, I'm never going to be able to afford. If I sold everything I own, including the house and the kids, I might be about 2 million quid short still. So not going to happen. Hey ho. But I thought, central driving position, how hard can it be? My plan is take the existing dash, steering wheel, pod as much as I can, and move it about a foot sideways so it sits in the middle of the car. Cut away the floor so I can move the pedals across, maybe move the master cylinder or make a linkage to make the existing master cylinder to the new pedal location. Move gear linkage I mentioned earlier, so that has to move over, move the handbrake over, modify the tunnel so that either another one of these seats or possibly a fabricated seat can sit in the middle. take the existing seats and move them back to where the rear seats were, with some sort of roll cage around them or rollover hoop, and probably some extra tubes just to stiffen up the chassis, because these are notorious for not being the strongest. And if my kids are in the back, I would like them to have a bit of crash protection, but not add too much weight. There, I hope that's enough of an introduction to what I've got planned for the car. In the words of the inestimable Colin Chapman, for speed add lightness. So it's something I've always kept in mind when working on cars, and obviously trying to keep everything as lightweight as possible. I know I'm not going to keep it down to the 680 kilos that it currently is, because the engine's heavier, being an iron block. The gearbox is bigger, the wheels and tyres are going to be bigger. I'm going to have some sort of roll structure inside, but I'm going to aim to keep everything as light as possible as we go through. In terms of video content, I've got quite a few projects on the go outside the Peugeot. So I've got a few bikes that I'm building, so a beam bike, I've got a recumbent out there, I've got a few projects under here that may intrude into videos in the future. So if you're interested in seeing general mucking about with engineering, hopefully I'll have some stuff that will be of interest to you. Probably throw in a few beers along the way, see how that goes. If you've got this far, thank you very much. I do apologise for my laughable video efforts. Some of the editing I'm sure is quite comic, and the variable sound quality is going to be quite interesting, but all this is being recorded on an iPhone. If I do too many more of these, I may well invest in some better equipment so we can up the production values, but for now this will do. I believe I'm supposed to say smash the subscribe button, hit that like button, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future videos, but I'm not going to tell anyone to smash anything. If you watch a couple of my videos and you like what I'm doing, then please do subscribe. I'm not planning on world domination. This is just for me to share what I'm doing in here, and if anyone likes it, then great, share along with me. So thanks for watching, and hopefully see you soon.